a full focus on how one can spotlight the issues that each one of us is facing in our own generation, in our own ways. Whether this is a mental health issue, it's a fitness issue, it's looking at mindfulness in more holistic ways, or just understanding this entire conversation around mental health. Are we part of the problem? How can we find solutions to it? This and much more has been the focus of all the discussions here on She the People, on what we are calling the inaugural edition of Reframe. But with me now is somebody who builds crossroads into fitness, what's happening in your mind space, and also understands how one has challenges in making sure one keeps up with the pace that we often set for ourselves. Joining me now is George Anderson, who looks at a gamut of amazing aspects of the human body and behavior with his entire fitness coaching offering. George, thanks for joining us from London.
Thank you so much for having me and including me on the show. This looks like such a fantastic opportunity to reach people and to help people understand a bit more about this connection between physical well-being and mental well-being. So delighted to be here.
Great. And the topic of the discussion that we've picked together is getting back on the wagon. Now, before we get into how does one do it, what is it about?
Well, getting back on the wagon is an expression that's often used when somebody feels like they've just fallen off the tracks with their diet and their exercise and just general looking after themselves. And it's like, oh, got to get back on the wagon again. And it's just a really nice metaphor, I think, a lot of people understand and feel connected to and feel like when they are on the wagon, they feel really good. And so they know that actually doing these things is going to make a positive difference, not just to those long-term fitness or weight loss goals, but actually to how they feel in the moment, here and now, which makes it all the more frustrating when people who know what a difference it makes perhaps aren't doing those things. And it almost feels like a little bit of self-sabotage. So I think for most of us, Shaili, it's a case of being on the wagon, being off the wagon, being on the wagon, being off the wagon. It's a bit of a roller coaster for most of us. But the more we're able to recognize when it's having an impact and then make those steps to get back on track again, the sooner we can get back to engaging and enjoying life.
I have been very intrigued by the fact that in this course that you take some time, this isn't about others pushing you back on the wagon. It's about the self. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think we can be inspired by people who are around us. And certainly if we're in positive communities, I set up a Facebook group called On the Wagon about 5 or 6 years ago. And really what we found over the course of the last half a decade is that people really do feel like they can get pulled forwards with others as well. And so when you're surrounded by that, then it makes it a little bit easier because you see that others are struggling or going through the same challenges as you, and that can give you maybe the impetus you need to actually start. But you made the point there that it's not about others pushing you. Maybe others can pull you and show you the way, but ultimately it always comes down to us making the decision to take some of those actions that is going to get us back to that positive space that we want to be in.
So in that sense, it's much more about getting to know one's own self, delving into what we have become, where do we lack and where do we build our own strength. Do you think that's part of the issues we all are facing, not being familiar with our own self?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I suspect that many of your viewers and your subscribers and the people who are in your sphere, they probably already have a sense of self and an element of introspection and ability to observe as well as experience themselves. But actually, it's only really through a consistent and continual pursuit of checking in and objectively, without judgment, looking at, well, how am I doing now? How am I feeling at the moment? What's going on for me? Why am I thinking these thoughts? It's not a one-time thing that we get really good at it. We have to do it over a period of time. And I'll tell you what, something else that's come to my mind as well. I think that over the last 20 years that I've been in the fitness and the well-being world, including spending some time actually over in India as well. I was over there about probably 10, 12 years ago, delivering a personal training diploma course up in Jalandhar, which was an absolute delight. And I know that things have massively changed over there as well. But I think the fitness industry has a lot to answer for when it comes to this connection between you've got to eat the right foods, you've got to exercise in the right way if you want to lose weight, tone up, get fit, get healthy. It's all make these sacrifices, take these actions now, and at some point in the future, then you're going to get some results. Whereas I think really the connection that I'd love more people to make is that, you know what, actually, if you make a few changes to your food, you give yourself the nourishment that you really need and deserve, you get some sleep, more sleep than perhaps you're getting at the moment, you hydrate properly, you move around a little bit more, not only will that help you in the long term, it's going to make a difference to how you feel right now, not like tomorrow, today, in the next few minutes. And the more we can make that connection between well-being and performance, well-being and mental health, well-being and just this sense of wellness and how we're feeling and how we're able to respond to other people, the quality of our relationships to some extent depends on our own emotional and mental energy and the bandwidth that we have to share with other people as well. I think that connection is the most important message that I really want to get out there to more people.
So, not to sound naive, but I think a lot of us often ignore the connection between food and fitness. Can you elaborate a bit more on what you just told me?
Yeah, sure. We think about energy often as being a very physical commodity. Well, we need the physical energy. But a question I often put to people when I'm presenting, especially to a corporate audience, is who perhaps spend most of their day sitting down, is have you ever spent the day sitting down, got to the end of the day, and you still feel completely exhausted and just drained? And most hands go up at the answer to that question, which shows us that it's not just about the physical energy, but this does still give us the foundation to support our emotional energy and our mental energy, our ability to focus and to manage the stresses and the strains and the decisions and the stresses of the day. But your point there and your question was about the connection between nutrition and the food that we're eating and fitness and well-being. And actually there's masses of studies now, actually way more than there was 20 years ago when I first started in this game, connecting even things like gut health and brain health, gut health and mental well-being. If we're eating a large, diverse range of nutrients, if we're eating fermented foods, if we're avoiding certain toxins and too much sugar and, just being a little bit more mindful about some of the things that we're putting into our systems, then it can really make a difference to our immune system. It can make a difference to our ability to focus, to concentrate, and it can make a really big difference to our mood as well. So the food, fitness, activity, all of these things can really impact the way that we feel. And that can give us the foundation, as I said there, to build on for these other elements of energy and well-being as well, such as emotional and mental energy.
So, emotional energy, discussing the fact that at this point, a lot of us are struggling in a post-pandemic world. And we've had all kinds of relationships with our emotions. How are people making a comeback in this post-pandemic world, getting back on the wagon, a wagon that's been pretty unpredictable, really?
Yeah, a lot of people joke. They say that they're currently lying in the dirt, looking longingly at the wagon disappearing into the distance. So to kind of take that metaphor a stage further. But you know what? I think the most successful people for getting back on the wagon, or the most successful approach rather, is to think about progress rather than perfection. And a lot of the time, especially where diet's concerned, I think most people will relate to this. When you've been a little bit off track and off the wagon with food, it's very tempting to think, right, you know what? I'm going to quit sugar. I'm going to quit alcohol. I'm going to just go 100% perfect. I'm going to eat brilliantly from now on. No more snacking, no more late night eating. I'm just going to be perfect. And of course, that will get you amazing results if you could stick to it. But the problem is it's incredibly overwhelming. It's incredibly difficult to stick to this vision of perfection. And who is to say what perfection really is anyway? Because what perfect is for one person might be completely different to somebody else's view of that, depending on your approach and what works best for you. But when you focus on making progress, on taking those small, manageable, sustainable steps, it actually builds motivation, it builds momentum, and it actually makes a difference. So if you're currently really off the wagon when it comes to your food, or you're not doing any exercise or activity at all, just doing a small amount of exercise each day, or just going for a walk a couple of 3 times a day, just for 10 minutes or so, or just maybe improving by having a little bit more nutritional diversity in your diet. So you're having some more veggies, you're eating some more fruit in the day as well. Just small tweaks like that can actually make a really noticeable difference to how you feel now, which, remember, we said is more important really than these long-term effects as well. And if you can really hook onto this, I feel better, then you're more likely to actually want to do those things and maybe build on those things as well.
So I'm going to put you in the spot, George. We all have tried to be a little smarter about, let's say, self-help. That's how the start of the pandemic got us busy. Listen, I'm going to do this with myself, and I'm going to get that 10-point plan and this 7-point exercise and so on, right? In many ways, humans need things to be gamified for them to work. Do you think the pandemic has sort of made us more cynical about getting on to these issues and solving it for ourselves? Because it just seems life is so short. And the reason I'm asking you this question is because I battle with this question. It's what holds me back to get onto the wagon.
Yeah, you know what? It's a great question. And I think that it touches on something that's even deeper, perhaps, which is that we, in this world of social media and online experts and talking heads about here are the things that you should do, we almost give up our own sense of responsibility, our own sense of that inner voice that we have, where we know what to do. We kind of know what the answers are. You mentioned about getting to know ourselves as well, and constantly being aware of how we're feeling, this emotional acuity, emotional intelligence, awareness, and ability to manage and regulate our own emotions. And I think in some respects, we're almost losing a little bit of that, and we're outsourcing it to the experts. We're looking for the magic solution, the silver bullet that's going to solve all of our problems, that we don't have to think about it anymore. So a little bit like if you use Google Maps, you're lost, you don't know where to go, or you've got to go somewhere, you just stick it into Google Maps and you just go, I follow this route. You no longer have to think about directions. And so you actually lose your ability to sense direction and to know where you're going. And I think we've got a little bit like that with our well-being and looking after ourselves. And what's really actually a lot of the time quite intuitive, we don't listen to those voices anymore. And instead we drown out those voices rather with listening to other voices. And of course they are numerous. Some of them are very loud. And so we end up just with this confusion. Like, what do I do? How do I proceed? So actually off the back of that, I don't even know how close that came to answering your question, but off the back of that, if there's one piece of advice I might suggest is to don't ignore those people who have your maybe best intentions at heart and who have something of value to offer and can give you some suggestions and some guidance, but don't ignore your own guidance as well. Don't ignore that inner voice that you have. Sometimes just sit and in that quiet space without phones and distractions and TV and anything else that will just give you that noise in your mind. Just sit quietly and listen to that voice and try and listen to what it has to say, listen to what those answers might be, and maybe start taking some of those actions as well.
I like the idea of inner guidance. I think it sort of makes me feel more responsible for my own self. Well, that said, when one looks at bringing upon change, we all want lofty answers. We want it to happen quicker. And you're an advocate of incremental changes, right? Where does one start? Does one start at food? Does one start at emotional well-being? Does one start at fitness? How does one answer that for oneself?
You know what, actually, I'd say start with sleep. Sleep is one of those cornerstone habits that if you can get sleep improved just a little bit, it makes it easier to stick to whatever diet plan you've set yourself the next day. It makes it easier for you to feel motivated to exercise or to be disciplined about doing all of the wonderful self-care things like meditation or mindfulness or journaling or practicing gratitude. 3 wonderful ways to support your own mental well-being. But sometimes we just don't do it because we either forget, or we just don't have the energy, or we just don't feel like we have that that bandwidth to do anything else, even if it is something that's for us. So if we can track back and look at sleep and improving sleep, I mean, it sounds like, well, just get more sleep. It's not as simple as that. Actually, one of the cruel ironies of stress and overwhelm is that the very best thing for us is to get more sleep, but it's also one of the things that's so massively impacted when we are feeling stressed and overwhelmed. But we don't help ourselves either, I think, in that respect. So small changes, like I said a moment ago, small things we can do to help improve our chances of getting a better and higher quality night's sleep, not just quantity, but quality as well. Things like having a screen curfew. And what I mean by that is a lot of people, certainly who I speak to, when I ask the question, who goes to bed at night scrolling through Instagram or TikTok and maybe looking at how much better everybody else's life is compared to theirs? Now I think I'll try and get a good night's sleep. It's just not the best thing for us. It's not the best thing for our mental health. It's not the best thing for promoting sleep. We need to create this discipline of having a screen curfew, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes before we intend on turning out our lights, because that's going to start dropping those cortisol levels, those stress hormone levels, and allow us to elevate the melatonin, the sleep-inducing hormone levels as well. So we actually get off to sleep much faster. 2 other things that I would chuck in there to the mix as well in terms of little things we can do to help improve our sleep. One of them, another one is to maybe just monitor how much caffeine that we're consuming in the day. I love a nice cup of coffee, but I also know if I have more than 3 cups, or if I drink coffee after midday, that's my caffeine curfew, then it just destroys my sleep. And when I don't get my lights out by 10:30 because I'm wired but tired, then I don't get up in the morning the next day with as much energy. And so the next day is just a little bit down on energy. So that would be the second thing. And then the third is, I mentioned about gratitude there. And let me ask you, do you practice gratitude? Are you on the gratitude train already?
I wouldn't say I'm on a train, but yeah, it's sort of ingrained in me, right? I mean, how can we not? After this pandemic, I think gratitude is sort of like visible. You know what I mean? Like that's a thing. You ignored it all this while because you thought it was your second skin. But today, I think during the pandemic, I'm recognizing it as an entity that we need to just sort of hold on to.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would recommend here to anybody listening and agreeing wholeheartedly, nodding their heads along to that philosophy, that idea of, we've been through so much, we've had so much taken away from us, we've had so much restriction. Now look around, look at the freedom, look at maybe a bit more hope. We could lots to be grateful for, but actually deliberately practicing gratitude every single day as one of the last things you do at night is incredibly powerful, not just to help improve your sleep, but just general well-being and mental health boosts as well. It's very easy to do. In fact, let's do it now. Think of, in the evening, I'd suggest doing 3 things, but for now, let's just think of one thing that over the last 24 hours, you have been grateful for. What one thing have you been grateful for? If I was answering that question right now, and for me, it's still, not even halfway through the day yet. I had a call. Actually, here's something. I had a call with a friend of mine who got a mini mastermind. He's helping me with some business stuff. I'm helping him with some business stuff. And I said, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" at the beginning of our call. And he said to me, "Ah, yeah, good, thanks. Actually, you know what? I've had a really, really difficult week and he told me about some challenges he's having at home. And I was so incredibly grateful. This was literally 2 hours ago. So incredibly grateful that he had felt open enough and comfortable enough to share that with me. I mean, guys aren't particularly good at doing that anyway, but this is all about mental health. So I think this is quite a good thing for me to be grateful for right now, that somebody found me and our relationship solid enough that he didn't think I was going to judge him. I was going to dismiss him. And I was just able to listen. I was really grateful. So that's one thing. Tonight, I will remind myself of that. I would write it down, conversation with my friend, and I'll go back to that time and I'll actually re-experience those positive emotions. That's the power of practicing gratitude versus just being grateful, which can be quite transient. We have it or we don't have it. So practicing gratitude, that's one of my things. How about you? What's one thing perhaps that you're grateful for this very day?
So I live in the hills right now, and I can breathe unpolluted air. And I can't tell you how often I say thank you to God for just giving us some spaces where you can actually breathe. But you know what you said, George, about the difference between practicing gratitude and being grateful. I think there's a distinction there that we often see with blurred eyes, because we possibly are not aware of how different the two can be. So I want to ask you my final question, which is related to a great deal of things you said in this discussion, which is that, we always say that, okay, this is how you get back onto the wagon. But where are we going with it? What is our destination? And what will tell us we are getting there, somewhere? So I just want to kind of get a sense, because I imagine that people are constantly asking themselves these questions in their journey of emotional well-being and so on.
Yeah, and I think going back to what I said about the fitness industry and all that has to answer to over the last couple of 3 decades, is not only have we teed up that doing these physical things to look after ourselves will lead us to a destination of weight loss, better fitness, more body tone, better health. I think we also naturally think that, well, I need to do these things because it's going in a particular direction, and it's very future focused. Now, there's nothing wrong with having goals. There's nothing wrong with saying, I want to run a 10K or a marathon, or I want to get into a clothes size that's a little smaller. I want to feel more confident about my physical appearance. So nothing wrong with having those goals, but I would say the wagon is not something that's necessarily moving. It's something that's here right now, and every future moment is a moment that we will experience, just like we're experiencing this moment. And actually, the wagon is about having the energy, having the engagement with the present moment right now, not just looking at the future. So, and this is one of the things that certainly for me and my training, my exercise, the things that motivates me to take care of myself and to get up early and to meditate and to journal and to study and to do all of those things isn't just because I want to, at some point in the future, then I will be happy. At some point when I've achieved these results, then I will feel successful. Then I will be able to have everything that I want. Like I do those things because I want to feel good now, both in the process of doing them and in the aftermath of doing those things as well. So I'd encourage anybody who's listening to this to just have that dual perspective. Yes, sure, great, have goals, move towards something, but actually make those changes, not because society expects it of you to look a certain way or to, you should have positive mental health, but actually because you deserve it and you owe it to yourself. We can get the support from people around us, but we are the only ones who have the responsibility, not just the responsibility. We have the ability to respond to our situation so that we can enjoy and engage in the present moment, as well as striving for maybe a better future as well.
I love the way you put that. Our own responsibility to ourself, and respond to our ability of taking charge of our own selves, I guess, in many ways. George, it's been such a pleasure, but I don't let ever guests leave without asking them if I should have asked you something that I didn't and you would like to tell us.
I think one of the biggest challenges that people have, and perhaps that would be the question, like, what are some of the biggest challenges people have to starting? One of the things I see is that we have masses of expectations upon ourselves, and we believe that we should be doing things in a certain way. We believe we should be doing them to a certain standard. And actually that word should can be quite destructive to our long-term results, our long-term chances of success. When we tell ourselves that we should do something, we're holding ourselves to a completely arbitrary, almost a random set of standards that nobody really is setting. We look at someone's life on social media and we think, well, that's how how happy they are. We don't see everything, even though we know it's just a snapshot. There's a part of us that thinks, oh, they're so much happier than I am, or they're so much more successful, or they have such better relationships, or they're in such better shape. They must be feeling amazing because of all of this. So we hold ourselves to these artificial standards. I think when we just strip that back and come back to, well, how do I want to feel now? Going back to what I said a moment ago, how do I want to feel now, as well as what are some of those goals that I have for the future? The challenge most people have is themselves. And when we can step outside of ourselves and look at the situation and think, well, I'm just going to start. I'm just going to make that start. And I'm going to applaud myself. I'm going to appreciate myself. And actually, I'm going to try and build this momentum without putting too much pressure, without putting too much self-judgment on myself for how well or how fast I should be making progress and how much I should be actually doing. So take away a little bit of the pressure on yourself and enjoy the present moment, and give yourself as much energy as you can by doing as many of those small things that are going to make a difference to you.
I think you just said it. Things that are just occupying our first thing in the morning and the last thing in the night, how we need to rewire ourselves, get into a better reframe. Thanks very much, George. Always a pleasure, but especially so on reframe. And it's wonderful to talk about sustainable momentum of getting it back onto the wagon. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.